All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Deputy Kosha Hayden, Public Information Officer for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. Thank you so much for gathering quickly for this press conference in relation to the arrest that's been made in the July 4th hit and run. Today we're going to have two speakers. We're going to have Sheriff Tony Spurlock and District Attorney George Brockler. They will give you statements, and then after they get done, we will answer questions. And if you can just make sure on your cameras that you have the interpreter in full view. And I'll turn it over to Sheriff Spurlock.
Thank you, Kosha. Thank you again for being here. I want to go over just a couple quick things, and then share a little bit of information about the victim's family. So an arrest has been made in the hit and run crash that took place on 4th of July with the Parker residence, Chuck Vogel, who was riding his bicycle early that morning. And at 6:25 in the morning, deputies received a call of a hit and run crash of a bicyclist on Pine Lane and Centennial Drive, which is right in front of Parker Core Knowledge in the Parker area. The vehicle that was involved in the hit and run was later found in an apartment complex in a neighboring community. We did ask for some assistance from Crime Stoppers. They put an alert out, and information was sent out through Crime Stoppers. I want to tell you that we put a lot of resources on this early on in the case, and to my left is the group of detectives, traffic accident investigators, and support staff that worked every day around the clock since July 4th until the arrest was made yesterday on the suspect. And this is a team that is from our traffic unit, the major crimes unit at Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and members of our impact unit. So I personally want to thank them for working around the clock, doing some magic really to locate the suspect and get the suspect into custody, which these are very, very difficult cases. And so I want to thank you all for doing what you do best and serving the citizens of Douglas County. I also want to thank some agencies that helped us out a great deal, and that was the Aurora Police Department and the DEA that helped us both here in Colorado and in Nebraska, where the suspect was arrested. The Nebraska State Patrol, the Box Butte, Nebraska County Sheriff's Office, the Greeley Police Department, the Weld County Sheriff's Office, and the Denver Police Department's Crime Lab. All of those individuals made significant contributions to this case and helping us track down this suspect. The suspect who was arrested on July 16th is Preston James Doris, date of birth of 4/29 of 83. He was taken into custody at Scottsbluff, Nebraska, on two separate warrants by the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and one of those is related to this hit and run crash. He was transported yesterday from Nebraska to Colorado, and he is currently in custody at the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. I want to touch a little bit on something that I think is so important, and I think this is what helped drive the men and women to my left. Chuck was a retired man who worked tirelessly to get to where he was at, to be retired. He was married, a father, and in 40 days of the time of his death, he was going to be a grandpa for the first time. And we have spent time with the family, and that in itself has just really tugged on our heartstrings. Sitting across from his son and daughter-in-law and his wife, and explaining to them the difficulties of working a hit-and-run crash. And again, I have to tell you that working with everyone, to include the district attorney's office, we were able to work through all of the issues in this case that were pertinent to us to get arrest warrants for this suspect. We will have his photo available. The photographs that are on the front is Mr. Vogel and his wife, and then a photo of him where he was on his bicycle, one of his passions that he and his son shared together. And again, I want to thank the men and women of the Douglas County Sheriff's Office for doing a great job and getting this case to this point at this time. I now want to turn it over to George Brockler, the District Attorney of the 18th, to talk a little bit about the charges and where we're going from here. George.
My name's George Brockler. I'm the District Attorney. I just presume you guys know all that, but I know that everybody likes to have the spelling of the name, so it's George and Brauchler. When a member of our community has their life cut short by the conduct of another, there must be answers as to why. If it's a crime, it must be solved, and the person responsible for that person's untimely death must be held accountable and brought into our system. And what I'm proud of here is that we have continued to move forward towards that end. Now, no matter what you see here, no matter what charges ultimately result from this, and I'm happy to talk about those in a moment, the individual that the sheriff has just identified, that we have arrested and that we will prosecute, must be presumed innocent for this system to work. There can't be any presumption of guilt. It has to be the opposite. This person is entitled to due process. This particular crime, and I want to tell you that it is unusual that we have a homicide in our jurisdiction. It's not anymore. We seem to have them more regularly than I recall. But this one in particular took place on a road about 5 minutes from where me and my family live, in a place where I ride my bike, sometimes to work, sometimes for leisure. It's just down the road from the Parker Library where my kids have ridden their bikes. We're in a state that prides itself on the health of its populace, and in part it's because we avail ourselves of the outdoor activities, including bike riding. Bikes are everywhere. When someone is involved in an accident with someone on a bike, whatever fear sets in, you cannot make it better by fleeing. That's my public service announcement. You must stay and own up to the conduct and be there. That is humanity. That is who we are as Coloradans. This particular case reflects allegations that someone fled the scene and chose themselves over the person that they injured and ultimately killed. In this particular case, we are just now at the very front end. So procedurally, let me tell you what happens. This person has already been brought before a judge. There are two separate bonds at work here. There was an initial warrant based on a charge of robbery that had a $25,000 cash property or surety bond attached to it. This morning, the larger case, the more recent case, the one the sheriff talked to you about, came before the judge, and that bond was $250,000 cash property or surety. Now, I should tell you, July 22nd, just a few days from now, really, we're going to come to court with the formal filing of charges. So what's happened right now is there are charges that appear in the affidavit and the arrest warrant. Those are not necessarily a complete list of charges that we'll ultimately pursue, but we'll know almost definitively by the 22nd of July. And let me tell you, there's some things out there that we're still waiting on, some witness interviews, some forensic information before we make a final determination. I think it's fair to ask, what is the universe of potential charges that are out there? Those would include the ones that you see in the affidavit to include hit and run involving a death. That is a third-class felony in the state of Colorado. There are two potential but uncharged charges of vehicular homicide. One that we know of, that we see all the time, is premised on whether or not someone was intoxicated or under the influence of some substance. I don't know that we have that charge here. We're still looking into some things. There's also the possibility of vehicular homicide premised on reckless driving. That too is continuing to be explored. There's also motor vehicle theft is a charge we are considering. That robbery count that I told you about that had generated the initial $25,000 bond, that is likely to be subsumed into this prosecution as it is part of the fact pattern here. And then there's some failure to notify police of an accident or a crime. That's probably the smallest charge. I think what you need to know about the biggest charge on here right now, this third-class felony, is that in the state of Colorado, we have incredibly weak laws when it comes to killing people on the road by driving and what you do afterwards. This is a charge that, while potentially carries a 4 to 12-year Department of Correction sentence, it is a probation-eligible charge. It is possible for someone to, in this state, to drive drunk or high and run over 3 or 4 people with their car, killing them, and walk out of court on probation. That's the law in the state of Colorado. These are the laws that we're dealing with here. Now, on the 22nd, when we finalize that list of charges that we're going to initially proceed with, happy to have a conversation with you about the different sentencing ranges that are for each of those charges. But that top one, that hit and run resulting in death that we have, that's indicated in the affidavit, I wanted you to know that's the potential range on that. My hat's off to you, men and women out there, for continuing to pursue this. It's one of the things that makes this law enforcement agency, our partners in this community, great, is that we take this stuff seriously, and we're going to continue to pursue it until its just end. If there are any other questions, and I'll turn it back over to the Sheriff and Chief Johnson. If there's any questions, I'll stick around for those. Thank you.
Questions, anyone?
Do you know if he's from, Scottsbluff? Do you know if he's from there?
We don't know for sure if that is not his residence, so he's not from there, but he had associates there.
Do you know where he does live?
Last would be the Greeley area.
Thanks, Chief.
Yep.
Can we get a spelling of the suspect?
Sure. Preston, Preston, James, James, Doris, Dorris, 42983.
Can you describe where he was in that time from the accident to now, or how he was tracked down?
So these detectives over here and support staff really started putting the case together, and through interviews and other means, we were able to determine that a prime suspect, or a suspect, which later turned out to be this individual, was in Nebraska. And so detectives traveled to Nebraska and worked through some hoops there to gather intelligence information, and then warrants were issued for the individual's arrest. I don't know when he left the state of Colorado, if it was shortly after the crash, but I know that we had him there, obviously around the 19th.
Do you know who is the registered owner of the vehicle?
Yes, the registered owner of the vehicle was, that individual was not involved in this case in the sense of the crash.
So was it stolen? Was the car stolen?
The car was not stolen.
Is he a relative of the person who does own the car?
He is not, no.
Friend, maybe? You know?
I think probably associate of someone who owns the car, yes.
What was the role of the DEA in this?
So we used both DEA and all of those detectives that were working on it, Aurora PD and stuff, from task forces, that we were able to go into the state of Nebraska to get intelligence information and to conduct surveillances and such. So
Did you guys originally put out a plea for tips? Did you receive any useful tips from the public?
we received some useful tips. I do not believe that we received anything from Crime Stoppers. I don't think we have anything from them, but we did receive some tips. But the majority of the information that led us to this arrest was really generated by the work of the police officers to the left of me, the cops doing basic cop work.
You talked about the challenges of a hit and run, and then not knowing who the driver is, not having it on surveillance video or anything. Can you describe what those challenges were for you?
So these are very difficult cases, as the district attorney said. You can imagine you have a hit and run, and then you find the car. When you quickly find out that the owner of the car wasn't in the car, you now have a number of complicated issues that you have to address, and it really is a whodunit. And that is where good police work comes into play, where a lot of These detectives knocked on every door that was in that apartment complex and everything that led from the crash. They did a lot of work to try to find anyone who had information, any video, anything that could lead them to a suspect or to more information. And that's how we got to where we're at today, was just a lot of detectives working the street, talking to people, and getting information.
Do you have video of the suspect leaving the car?
Okay, we do have some video that obviously we're not releasing at this point because it's still being analyzed, but we do have some video of the car and possibly where it was parked and in the general vicinity of the crash.
Do you know which direction of the road Mr. Bowler was going down?
They were going. The car was going southbound on Pine Lane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know which direction Charlie was going?
I'd have to defer. I'm assuming he was going the same direction, but same direction, Lieutenant. Yeah.
Do you know how fast the suspect was going at the time of the incident?
That information is still being analyzed by the technicians. Some of them to the left of me here. They're still evaluating evidence from inside the car and some other things that will try to help us get as close as we can to the speed of the car.
And was the victim transported to a nearby hospital, or was it a death on scene?
The victim was transported to Parker Adventist Hospital, where he was pronounced dead.
Do you have any official time yet?
I do not have an official time. I could get that if you wanted it through the coroner's office, but I don't have it available to me.
Could you go over the total bond amount one time?
Yeah. The big bond is the $250,000 cash property or surety bond. I think GPS was ordered as well, in case he's able to post that. That prior bond, which is part of a charge that I'm guessing will be subsumed into that case, was for $25,000 cash property or surety.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you so much for coming. If you do want a copy of the mugshot, I just need to have you fill out a records request and give it to me, and then we'll have them email it to you. Thanks a lot.